guess you could say she broke through the steel ceiling, not the glass ceiling. But her father spent 4 decades as a GM die maker. I can't imagine that he would have thought his daughter would be the CEO of the company that he worked in. But it's another one of the great aspects of who we are as a society. To send that message, you know what, we're interested in all the talent and the innovation, the character that we can round up. That's how America will compete and win in a rapidly changing world. We can't afford to shut anybody out. So obviously, I congratulate GM for doing something that was based on merit, which happened to be selecting a woman CEO. You know, we have a lot of women in the corporate pipeline who have been working in their industries for a long time and are now finally in a position where I think they can be given the opportunity for leadership, like Mary Barra. And we're seeing, I think, these decisions made regardless of gender. It's who can do what we need done right now on behalf of our business. But I think it sends a really good signal to little girls and little boys across our country that, you know, we really don't have a person to waste. We want the hardest working, smartest, most innovative people, and we're going to find them in young women just as we find them in young men. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone, certainly not to anybody here, that building and selling cars, and to a great extent, created the American middle class. And the resurgence of the auto industry over the past few years has been a driving force behind our economic recovery. But it's not only that. I know that the dealers represented here and across our country play a vital role in communities. As small business owners, you're the source of good jobs and growth, oftentimes in places that need it the most. In fact, in preparing for coming here, I checked employment figures, and employment at dealerships is on the rise, up more than 3% over last year. Yeah, you should give yourselves a round of applause for that. But what makes you leaders in your communities goes beyond the economics. It's the Little League teams you sponsor, the schools you support, the hospitals, the museums, the community theaters, just so much else that you promote to improve the quality of life in your community. Dealers bore a big part of the burden rising out of the Great Recession, but you're showing us that great American characteristic of resilience. I became convinced, based on the information that I was provided by President Bush's administration, particularly Hank Paulson, the Secretary of Treasury, whom I had known since college. So he's not somebody who just popped up in my office. I'd known him. I knew what a serious, thoughtful person was, and I knew what a total free marketeer he was. That, you know, not only his career at Goldman, but his mindset. So when somebody like Hank Paulson says we have to take some drastic steps to prevent a collapse that could be worse than the Great Depression, I paid attention. And I think if you look at TARP, and in particular look at the bailout, we actually have had that money paid back, if you combine the two, which is something that I believe a lot of us were worried about, but is a good signal. I do think that with the toughing out that Ford was able to do, and then going into bankruptcy from GM and Chrysler, and then coming out of it and looking like they not only just survived, but are in a position to thrive, I think that they were the right decisions. That doesn't mean they were not without cost. I know that, you know, the NADA lost dealerships, lost jobs, lost, you know, those small businesses that were at the core of a lot of communities. But the overall picture turned out to be positive, and with dealerships coming back in terms of sales and employment. I hope we're on a much firmer footing now than we were, 5, 6 years ago.
Oh, absolutely right.
In 2011, I was in Uzbekistan in Central Asia, and I visited a General Motors powertrain plant outside Tashkent. That's about as far as you can get from where we are right now, but General Motors was there. And that gave the United States a boost in a region where both Russia and China are competing for influence. Too often as I traveled as secretary, foreign leaders, both government and business, would ask me, why aren't American companies competing for our contracts? The Chinese are here, the Indians are here, the Brazilians, the South Koreans, the Japanese. What about American businesses? And I always said, well, I will do what I can to encourage more competition by our businesses, but the fact is that all too often the deck is stacked against us. The contracts are not on the level. Leaders are lining their pockets, not creating jobs for their people. So it really lifted my spirits to see one of our great American companies planting the flag all the way over in Central Asia. Because doing that means there are more jobs back home. That plant in Tashkent was full of American-made machinery and technology. Revenues from foreign sales help not only U.S. automakers, but other foreign automakers that are doing business in our country to have a bigger economic impact. And certainly we've seen the increase in sales leading to greater R&D, commitment and investment in infrastructure. So I'm pretty optimistic about where we are, having worked our way through the worst economic global crisis since the Great Depression. My second car was one that I bought, a Fiat, kind of ahead of my time, when I began teaching law at the University of Arkansas Law School in Fayetteville. I lent it to a friend who was moving and didn't have a car of her own. It was stolen. I got a call in the middle of the night from the state police asking me if I owned a yellow Fiat, and I said I did, and they said it had been on a high-speed chase and had crashed and totaled. Now, my first reaction was I could not get that car to go very fast. I couldn't understand how the robbers had been able to pull that off. So I was a little proud of the fact that the car performed right before it died, a very tragic, desperate death. But I've always enjoyed stories about cars and adventures, and I have to confess that one of the regrets I have about my public life is that I can't drive anymore. My husband thinks that's a blessing, but he's the one who should talk. Last time I actually drove a car myself was 1996, and I remember it very well, and unfortunately so does the Secret Service, which is why I haven't driven since then.